Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Chapter 11. Dark Days. Beth did have the fever, and was much sicker than anybody but Hannah and the doctor suspected. Meg stayed at home and kept house, feeling guilty when she wrote letters to her mother, never talking about Beth's illness. Jo was with Beth day and night. At some stage the little girl began to talk in a hoarse, broken voice and called for her mother. Jo grew frightened. Meg wanted to write the truth to Marmee, but Hannah said there was no danger yet. Mr. March had a relapse and could not think of coming home for a long while. Beth was very ill, going in and out of consciousness. The 1st of December was a wintry day. When Dr. Bangs came that morning, he examined Beth, held her hot hand in both of his own for a moment, and said to Hannah, "If Mrs. March can leave her husband, she should come." Jo ran to the parlor, snatched up the telegram, and rushed out into the storm. She was soon back, and Laurie came in with a letter saying that Mr. March was getting better again. Jo read it thankfully, but looked so upset that Laurie asked, "Is Beth worse?" "Yes, she is. She doesn't look like my Beth, and there's nobody to help us bear it. Mother and father are both gone, and God seems so far away, I can't find him." As the tears streamed fast down poor Jo's cheeks, she stretched out her hand in a helpless sort of way, as if groping in the dark, and Laurie took it in his, whispering as well as he could with a lump in his throat, "I'm here. Hold on to me, Jo dear." She could not speak, but she did hold on, and the warm grasp of the friendly human hand comforted her. Laurie longed to say something tender and comfortable, but no fitting words came to him, so he stood silent, gently stroking Jo's bent head as her mother used to do. It was the best thing he could have done, for Jo felt the unspoken sympathy. Soon she dried the tears that had relieved her and looked up with a grateful face. "Thank you, Teddy. I'm better now." "Keep hoping for the best, Jo. Soon your mother will be here, and then everything will be all right." A breath of fresh air seemed to blow throughout the house, and something brightened the quiet rooms. Everyone rejoiced but Beth, as she lay unconscious of anything. It was past 2 when Jo heard a movement by the bed, and turning quickly saw Meg kneeling in front of her mother's chair with her face hidden. A dreadful fear came to Jo. "Beth is dead, and Meg is afraid to tell me." She looked at Beth. The fever flush and the look of pain were gone, and the little face looked so pale and peaceful that Jo couldn't cry. Leaning over her sister, she kissed the damp forehead and softly whispered, "Goodbye, my Beth. Goodbye." Hannah woke up, hurried to the bed, looked at Beth, felt her hands, and then exclaimed, "The fever's turned. She's sleepin' natural. Her skin's damp and she breathes easy. Praise be given. Oh, my goodness me." The doctor arrived and confirmed it. He smiled and said, "Yes, my dears, I think the little girl will pull through this time. Keep the house quiet and let her sleep." "Oh, if only Mother would come now," cried Jo. There was a sound of bells at the door below, a cry from Hannah, and then Laurie's voice saying in a joyful whisper, "Girls, she's come! She's come!" Chapter 12. Amy's Hard Times. Amy was having hard times at Aunt March's, who meant to be kind, for the well-behaved little girl pleased her very much. Amy liked the Indian cabinet full of queer drawers, little pigeonholes, and secret places, storing all sorts of trinkets, some precious, some not, all old. "I like the diamonds best, but I should choose this if I might," thought Amy, looking at a string of gold and ebony beads with a heavy cross. "I wish I knew where all these pretty things would go when Aunt March dies," she told Esther the maid. "I think that the little turquoise ring will be given to you when you go, for Madame approves of you." Esther set up a small prayer chapel for Amy, with a table, a footstool, and a picture of the Divine Mother. On the table she put her little testament and hymn book, kept a vase of the best flowers Laurie brought her, and came every day to sit alone, thinking of good thoughts and praying for her sister. Chapter 13. Confidential. When Beth awoke, the first things she saw were the little Rose and Mother's face. Then she slept again. Meg and Joe fed their mother while they listened to her whispered account of Father's health, Mr. Brooks' promise to stay and nurse him, the journey home, and Laurie waiting for her at the station. The house was still. Mrs. March would not leave Beth's side, but rested in the big chair. Laurie drove off to see Amy, and both the little girl and Aunt March were relieved and happy. Mrs. March also came to visit, and Amy and her mother sat alone together in the chapel for a while. "I like it very much, dear," said Marmee. "It's an excellent plan to have some place where you can go to be quiet when we are all upset." As Amy pointed to the picture, Mrs. March saw the ring on her hand and smiled. Amy said, "Aunt gave me the ring today. I'd like to wear it, Mother." "It's very pretty, but I think you're rather too young, Amy," said Mrs. March. That evening Joe went to Beth's room. "What is it, dear?" asked Mrs. March. "Last summer Meg left a pair of gloves over at the Lawrences, and only one was returned. We forgot about it till Teddy told me that Mr. Brook had owned up that he liked Meg but didn't dare say so. She was too young, and he so poor." "Do you think Meg cares for him?" asked Mrs. March. "Mercy me, I don't know anything about love and such nonsense," cried Joe. "Well, my dear, don't get angry about it. John went with me at Mr. Lawrence's request, and was so devoted to poor father that he couldn't help becoming fond of him. He was perfectly open and honorable about Meg, for he told us he loved her, but would earn a comfortable home before he asked to marry him." Chapter 14. Pleasant Meadows. Like the sunshine after a storm, the weeks that followed were peaceful and happy. Mr. March began to talk of returning early in the new year. Beth was soon able to lie on the study sofa all day, and in time with the dolls sewing. Meg learned to cook, while Amy started giving away many of her treasures. As Christmas approached, Joe and Laurie came up with all sorts of impossible ideas to celebrate. Mr. March wrote that he should soon be home. Then Beth felt very well as Joe carried her to the window to see the surprise they had made. Out in the garden stood a stately snow maiden, crowned with holly, carrying a basket of fruit and flowers in one hand, a great roll of music in the other, a blanket around her shoulders, and a Christmas carol that came from her lips on a pink paper streamer. "God bless you, dear Queen Bess. May nothing you dismay, but health and peace and happiness be yours this Christmas day." How Beth laughed when she saw it. Now and then, in this busy world, things do happen in a delightful storybook fashion, and it was a comfort. Laurie opened the door and popped his head in very quietly. He only said, "Here's another Christmas present for the March family." There in the doorway appeared a tall man, leaning on the other arm of another tall man. For several minutes everybody seemed to lose their wits, for the strangest things were done, and no one said a word. Mr. March was invisible behind 4 pairs of loving arms. Joe nearly fainted and had to be doctored by Laurie. Mr. Brook kissed Meg entirely by mistake, and Amy, the dignified, tripped over a stool and hugged and cried over her father's boots. Mrs. March was the first to recover, held up her hand with a warning, "Hush, remember Beth." Never mind what happened just after that, for the full hearts overflowed, washing away the bitterness of the past and leaving only the sweetness of the present. There never was such a Christmas dinner as they had that day. The fat turkey was stuffed, browned, and decorated and looked delicious. So did the plum pudding, which melted in everyone's mouth. Everything turned out well, which was a mercy. Mr. Lawrence and his grandson dined with them, and also Mr. Brook. 2 easy chairs stood side by side at the head of the table, in which sat Beth and her father, feasting modestly on chicken and a little fruit. They drank to everyone's health, told stories, sang songs, reminisced, as the old folks say, and had a thoroughly good time. Chapter 15. Aunt March Settles the Question. Mr. March sat near Beth's sofa, and everyone kept coming into the room to check on them. Meg was absent-minded, shy, and silent, started when the bell rang, and colored when John Brooks' name was mentioned. There was a step in the hall. Jo laughed to herself, and when someone tapped on the door, opened it. "Good afternoon. I came to get my umbrella, that is, to see how your father finds himself today," said Mr. Brook, looking from one face to another. "He's very well. I'll get him and tell him you are here," and Jo slipped out of the room. Meg went toward the door, murmuring, "Mother will like to see you. I'll call her." "Don't go. Are you afraid of me, Meg?" Mr. Brook asked, and looked hurt. "Well, how can I be afraid when you have been so kind to Father? I only wish I could thank you for it." "Shall I tell you how to be thankful?" asked Mr. Brook, holding Meg's small hand fast in both of his own, looking at her with love in his brown eyes. "Oh, no, please don't. I'd rather you not," she said. "I won't trouble you. I only want to know if you care for me a little, Meg. I love you so much, dear," added Mr. Brook. Meg softly answered, "I don't know." John just stood looking at her, so wistfully, so tenderly, that she felt her heart melting. Just then Aunt March came hobbling in. Mr. Brook vanished into the study. "Bless me, what's all this?" cried the old lady. "It's Father's friend. I'm so surprised to see you," stammered Meg. "Brook? That boy's tutor? I know all about it. You haven't gone and accepted him, child," cried Aunt March. "I shall marry whom I please, Aunt March," Meg said. "I couldn't do better if I waited half my life. John is good and wise. He's got heaps of talent. He's willing to work, and he's so energetic and brave. Everyone likes and respects him, and I'm proud to think he cares for me, though I'm so poor and young and silly," said Meg. Aunt March drove off. Meg stood for a moment, not sure whether to laugh or cry. Before she could make up her mind, she was grabbed by Mr. Brook, who said, "I couldn't help hearing, Meg. Thank you for defending me. And I needn't go away, but may stay and be happy. May I, dear?" Meg meekly whispered, "Yes, John," and hid her face. 15 minutes later, when Jo came downstairs, she found Mr. Brook sitting on the sofa with Meg on his knee. Jo gasped. Meg jumped up, looking both proud and shy, but John laughed and said, "Sister Jo, congratulate us." Rushing upstairs, Jo burst into the room. "Oh, go down quick. John Brook is acting dreadfully, and Meg likes it." Nobody ever knew what went on in the parlor that afternoon. Quiet Mr. Brook astonished his friends by the way in which he spoke of the future, and he got his way. Everyone was happy, especially Meg and her John.